Hey, sports parents. If we haven't met, my name is Jonathan Carolyn, and I'm the host of the show. Today, we're joined by my friend Nick Tripp. At 15 years old, after never having played club or competitive soccer before, Nick's stepson, AJ, made an unexpected jump all the way to the highest level of youth soccer in America. To make the story even more out of nowhere, Nick and his wife, Sabrina, they are not your typical elite athlete parents. They're both self described computer nerds who don't have athletic backgrounds. In our conversation today with Nick, we talk about what it was like being thrust into that level of competition, what he and his wife learned throughout the years AJ played at that level, and how he would advise parents who have kids wanting to play at elite levels themselves. We also hit on the dynamic of blended families and talk about how sports helped Nick and AJ build their relationship together. Before we get to that, though, if you like the show today, we're asking you to please rate us and review us wherever you're listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, writing up a small review would be a huge help. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button while you're there. Most of all, if this episode helps you in any way, the best thing you can do is share it with a friend. With all that out of the way, here's my conversation with Nick. We're here with Nick. Nick, go ahead and say hey to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
So before we get into the big questions and we get into your stories and all that, we want to meet Dad first. It's my favorite part of this show. Can you tell us a little bit about your boys and what they play, if anything, and then what it's like being dad and stepdad to them?
Yeah, sure. My name's Nick. I have two boys. They're both 18 years old, 2 months apart. We'll talk more about that part later. They're not twins. Um, they are both big fans of sports and both have been athletes at different points in their lives. My son Connor played baseball, was a baseball kid from a very early age. Really loved it. And AJ, my stepson, is soccer all the way and always has been from day one. So those are the two sports we spend a lot of time on in our family. Um, Being dad is the best, really. I love it. I don't know that I ever expected to love it as much as I did or do. But it's been a really great experience for me personally. Um, and especially the figuring out how to be both dad and stepdad, doing that in a blended family has been a journey, but it's been a really rewarding one.
The fact that Connor's 18 and he was like in diapers at my graduation party in college was like just hearing that, it's like you don't realize you get older until you hear things like that. It's like, oh yeah, like that
Yeah,
little baby at my graduation party is graduating high school this year.
no, kidding. He's been in college for a year already.
Oh,
He's
okay. So I'm even
so
older than I thought I was.
That's right.
So, all right. One thing I want to acknowledge before we get too far into this is when I first asked Nick to come on the show to talk about this, his immediate reaction was to hype up his wife and say I should talk to her. So I don't want that to go unnoticed. I asked Nick because we have a previous relationship and I wanted the perspective also as the step parent here. So Nick, before we get into this whole story, hype your wife up. Like tell
I
tell us about her because she deserves it.
I would love to. So the first thing I'll say is she would be here today with me if she did not have a prior obligation. She would have loved to talk about this. So my wife, Sabrina, is not a sports person. Never was. Could not have imagined a world where she would be watching sports, caring about sports, or even involved in it anyway. Really, even spending time outdoors was not on her radar. She is a city girl through and through and would describe herself as indoorsy otherwise. So, um, watching her become a soccer mom in the most extreme sense of that term has been really something. She has embraced it. She loves it. Um, and I love watching her do it. I've got a photo from one of the cup tournaments we did a couple of years ago somewhere in Maryland. I've got a photo of her on the sideline with a camera she rented for that, with a giant lens, like a sports photographer on a monopod, shooting photos from the sidelines because some of the boys on the teams needed pictures for recruiting. They needed game pictures. And so not only had she traveled to this tournament, but she was taking photos on the sideline for the boys. She's not a photographer, but she was making it happen. And that's been her attitude throughout all of this: is embrace it, go all in, and do the most. And it's wildly impressive.
The fun part about that story is she's doing the most, but it's in support of the boys. It's not because she wants something out of it. She just sees this group of boys who have dreams and goals and want to do something. She's like, all right, you need this? Let me go help you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's her attitude about raising kids in general, is just let's do everything we can for them. And that, has carried over into the team.
We had somebody on a couple weeks ago, Adam Godwin. He's a coach at the University of Florida, and he dropped a line in that episode that it's stuck with me since we recorded it like 4 or 5 months ago. He said that our job as parents is to help our kids pursue their passions, to do whatever we can within reason to help them pursue their passions. And watching you guys from afar, just getting bits and pieces because you don't post a ton on social, but like seeing, like, and hearing that story, it's the epitome of my kid has this passion. I'm going to do what I can to support them, even if I don't have a clue what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, Sabrina and I, my wife, we're both IT nerds. You know, both of us are people who were not, I like sports. I like watching sports. That's how you and I met. But I was never an athlete. I didn't participate in organized sports as a kid. So our frame of reference going into this was minimal. We we really didn't know a lot, but from the start, it was if our boys want to do it, if they're interested in it, we'll make it happen.
Yeah. And it's hard when you don't know because I grew up in sports. I grew up playing. My wife did nothing. And so she's going, we're in rec league at this point. So totally different world than what you guys have been living in the past few years. And she goes into it and like she's watching our kids play but she doesn't know like what comes next. Like are we going a competitive? Are we not go when do we do this? Like people are talking about this and it's a whole different world. So as things started to develop for you guys, and especially AJ who has gone more competitive, like how was that journey of figuring this out? Of okay, we're not in rec league anymore. We're not even in the basic travel. We're going like national here. How does that even happen?
So uh, I would say it just happened. That's how the experience was for Sabrina and I because um, okay, AJ was 15 years old. He'd played rec league soccer. He played his freshman year of high school soccer, um, and he wasn't thrilled by the experience of high school soccer. Just super competitive. He's very dedicated, and I think that short high school season just didn't measure up to what he was hoping for. So our local soccer club here in the Triangle, they had tryouts for the lower club levels of that team, and he thought, this is that sort of year-long season would be more enjoyable for him. He knew it would be a little more competitive. It just happened that that season was the first season that this club was participating in MLS Next. They were just adding that to the club. And the MLS Next coaches were there watching tryouts for the lower levels that day. So he got a call, maybe a week later, offering him a spot as the starting keeper for the U19 team as a 15-year-old. Now,
U19 like competitive or MLS Next?
MLS Next
Okay.
U19. Uh, again, this was the first season for the club, so new team. But and he came to us to talk about this, and we didn't understand what he was saying. It was like, great, you made the team, but he was so hyped up about it, like he was excited. So we had to get him to break it down, like, why is this a big deal? Help us understand. And you know, for him, it was, listen, if I want to play competitively, this is the top level of competition for youth soccer. This is as good as it's going to get for me. And I'm getting to start. He should have been on the U16 team at the time. I'm getting to start at the top level. He was nervous about that. That was obviously intimidating for him, but he was really excited. So We once we understood, okay, this is a big deal. We started doing our research and trying to figure it out. Talk to the coaches, tell us why we should do this, um, and it became pretty clear that this was going to be a huge commitment for us. Um, and no matter how much we were going to learn, we were going to go in partially blind. There was no way for us to understand every component of this until we just experienced some of it. Um, but the easiest part of that was actually the saying yes to AJ because he was that kid who was going to be all in. He is committed. You know, he and a couple of his friends were already getting up as high schoolers at 6 a.m. to go to the field and just practice with each other, but early in the morning on weekdays. That kind of thing is unusual in high school kids, and it was really clear. Okay, this is the sort of kid who will thrive in this environment if he has the opportunity. So, yeah, we got to say yes and start that journey.
How much of a punch in the face was it the first time you got the invoice?
Yeah, I think when you talk about the unknown and going in partially blind, um, there were a couple of unexpected things for us, right? Like um, the good. I'll start with the good thing that was unexpected for us. We became fans of this game. We had spent time on the sidelines as rec league parents watching little ones play, um, but watching the sport at that high competitive level is just a totally different thing. And it was impossible for us to not like that. And so getting to become fans of a sport and see it up close at that level of intensity was something new. So that was a really good thing
'Cause
for us.
I want to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
I know where you come from. You come from rural mountain North Carolina in the 80s and 90s, where soccer was not looked at as a
Well,
high thing.
so I'm actually not from the western part of the state. I'm central part of the state, but you're not wrong. Rural North
I thought you grew
Carolina
up in the
still.
western part, or your parents live? I'm okay.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
getting all sorts of stories twisted now.
no. But I'm from the Triangle area of North Carolina, but the rural part, south of the Triangle.
Okay.
This, before the Triangle was developed, for sure. Um, and so soccer for me was just a thing a few kids did, in near around Chapel Hill, but it definitely, I had no frame of reference for this, and basketball was the sport around here for sure. So that's what I grew up watching: basketball, later football, definitely not soccer, especially not soccer at this level. So, you know, this was not just MLS Next, this was MLS on the whole, and then Premier League games, because we've got teams in MLS Next that are part of academies that are connected to, European soccer clubs or Premier League teams or other levels in the UK football pyramid. So this was learning about the football pyramid, both in the United States and the UK. Like, this is all new for us. Um, but we got to become fans, and that was huge. But I will come back now to the financial aspect of that, and that was definitely, I guess, if there was one bad part that was unexpected for us, um, it would be really easy to say it was the cost of that. Um, but I think that that's a too simple of a way to look at it, because my career just happened to take off around the same time that soccer started for AJ in earnest at this level. Um, so for our family, we were able to make it work. I won't say that it was easy. That kind of expense, I don't think, is ever easy, but we made it work without a lot of difficulty. The truly unexpected bad thing for us was learning how inaccessible this level of sports is unless you have access to resources. Um, I know there are families on our team that are making huge sacrifices to make it possible for their kids. Um, and even for the few kids who might get assistance with the fees associated with the team, there's still the travel, and that's, national travel, airfare, many times a year to make some of these games. Um, and I've just spent a lot of time wondering how many stars this sport and other sports miss out on because, you know, families just don't have these resources to compete at that level. And that was not something I think Sabrina and I had ever considered before this.
I was doing, I had a college coach send me a message one time about this ECNL team, which I could start a war right now, but ECNL and MLS Next are fairly similar levels of soccer,
Yeah.
especially in terms of national and travel. But they're an ECNL program, and they were celebrating their college commitments for their kids. And they said that X amount of kids got Y amount of scholarship money. And then the college coach sent me a message saying, hey, this looks cool on the surface, but when you break it down, it's $11,000 per kid. And then if you go on their website and look at their fee structure, it was like $4,000 to play. But then they're like, we go to national tournaments, we get national games. You should expect to spend $1,000 per weekend that we travel. And so uh, when it comes to airfare and hotel and all that, like kids were putting or parents were putting in $10,000 to $15,000 per year to get $11,000 in a scholarship. And the whole point of the coach talking to me about it was that the financial commitment can't be for the scholarship that you get because it's never going to pay for what you commit to the journey.
Yeah, I completely agreed. I mean, I have, I think, more to say about the college side of this later, but I could not agree more. That should not be the reason you go into this. And, that's how it was, definitely how it was sold when we talked to the coaches up front about why we should do this for AJ early on. It was the recruitment visibility and college scholarships and all of that. Um, Now, on the other side of that, that is not why I would recommend doing this at all. It's got to be because it's your kid's passion and that's because they want to do what they want to do and that they're the kind of kid who's going to be dedicated to it.
I want to go back to the financial inequalities piece of it because it's something we don't focus on a ton and we haven't had a chance to talk about it on this show yet. But as someone who has lived through the top levels of youth sports in America and you've seen how much it's cost, you're in a position where you were able to afford it, which is, we have to admit, a privileged position because not everyone has that. Can you give me just a snapshot of what you all have seen without putting anyone on blast or like embarrassing anyone, but like some of the depths people are having to go through to finance this dream for kids that you've seen parents have to sacrifice for?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most obvious sacrifices that we've seen is when you get to national tournaments, travel for events, things like that. Is sometimes watching these kids travel by themselves because that's the only way the family's going to send someone. Um, you know, Again, AJ did start at 15 years old on the U19 team, which was kind of unusual. But even the U16 teams and some of these younger teams are also traveling to those. And so I know some parents are probably different than we are, but to put my 15-year-old kid on a plane and send him all the way across the country to a tournament and say, figure out how to get out of the airport, figure out how to get to the hotel. That's
And it's not
not
because the parents didn't want to be there. I want to make
correct.
that clear.
Right. Exactly. That is my point here. It's because the only way that family could afford to do it was if they were only had to pay for the ticket for the kid or for the hotel. Um, And, we've seen other things. One parent gets to travel, the other doesn't, is a frequent thing. Or because they're home working a second job to, maybe make that possible. I think that's kind of pretty common. Um, but it's that travel, that solo travel for kids that really has, killed us a little bit. Um, because the joy we get to experience of being there and participating in all that, we wouldn't trade it for anything. And so I feel I feel so bad for the other parents who have to make that sacrifice. At the same time, that's where it's important for other parents on the team to step up and step in and make sure that those kids get where they need to go. that they've got what they need. And, teenagers want to be independent. They don't necessarily want hand holding, but also in those situations, I think if, other parents are presented with the opportunity, definitely reach out to those kids. Definitely try to help because they will accept it if you make the effort. They won't ask, but they'll accept it if you reach out.
A friend of mine, his daughter is playing D2 basketball right now. And while her process, she went national AAU, I think her junior year of high school, going into senior year, I think it was. And he's from Winston, playing on a team based out of Atlanta. And so he said he was worried about it going into it because he had heard all these cutthroat stories of parents infighting and all this stuff with these programs. But when he got to it, it was the healthiest sports environment he'd ever been in because the parents were legitimately pulling for the other kids. And I think at these younger levels, especially at your younger travel levels, which you guys got to skip completely, you hear all this infighting between people trying to position themselves. With the truly elite kids, which is what AJ is, can you talk about the support that the families have between each other so that people can see a healthy view of what that looks like on a healthy team?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that my wife and some of the other moms on the team are in constant communication throughout the week, every week. And to be clear, the MLS next season runs from we start practices in July or August, early August, and the season wraps up in mid June. So there's really only July's the only month off we get during the year. And everybody has to talk throughout that entire time um, because people do need rides to games. They do need, can somebody crash in your hotel room for the weekend? Can you make sure that my kid eats? Can you make sure he remembers to bring water to the field so that he's not, it's those kinds of things everybody has to coordinate on and be in it together. Um, that may not be the case with every team. Maybe that was unique to our team. I doubt it. I think when you get to that level, everybody it's the village mentality, right? We're all in this together, and we want
And
to
I
see
would say
our.
if you're part of a team where the parents aren't supporting the kids that aren't their own, that probably says something about the level you're playing at and where you should be. If there's constant infighting to try to position yourself, then there's some issues there.
Well, yeah, I would say two things. One, that's the coach. I mean, the coach has to set the pace there. Our coach, we've been really fortunate in that we got a great coach from the start. I don't know what our experience would have been like um, if our coach had not been fantastic. He's a former French Olympian who played soccer for his nation, and he's really passionate about the sport. Really loves it. Really loves the kids. Um, so making sure the kids understand why they're getting playing time, what's expected of them. I think that comes down to the coaching. Um, at the same time, I would say if you're not having that experience with parents talking to each other and trying to do the best thing for the kids, like in a vacuum of leadership, you got to step up. You have to be the leader. And so that's on you to step in and figure out how to coordinate it. If you try it and then it doesn't work, that's a different story. Um, but, I'm a big believer in be the change you want to see. So step in.
I want to switch gears a little bit. And we've talked about AJ with the sport, but you stepping into AJ's life as stepdad. How old was AJ when you and Sabrina got together?
Uh, well, I think when we first met or really started dating, three.
Okay.
He was four when we got married.
So you've been around most of his life.
Yeah,
Connor's the same age.
that's right.
How has it been being stepdad in that situation? Blended family, like there's all the things that go into that. I don't have that experience. And
Yeah.
so, but I know it's such a common experience in the world today of blended families, co-parenting, all of the things that go with that. And I can't speak from it because it's not my lived experience. So, can you share with us a little bit what that's been like stepping in as stepdad?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to start with my kid, and then I'll come back to
Okay.
AJ. Because Connor, I had some concerns about starting this MLS Next journey with AJ when we do have another kid who's the exact same age and who wasn't starting this experience. Um, Connor was done with baseball already. He had stopped playing, but he is a easygoing, empathetic, and smart kid. So when we decided that he was going to do this, I was able to sit down with Connor and talk about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And he got it. He understood the opportunity that this represented for his brother. Uh, Also, again, he's a huge sports fan. Both of the boys are like they are the broiest sports bros that you could possibly imagine. Um, and they
Coming from
had,
two IT, like,
yeah,
do you prefer the term nerd, or like what's the pejorative there that you identify as?
I think nerd like completely describes us. But the boys have that in common. So Connor definitely got it. And, I'm sure it's not always been easy, but he's never complained about it. He's just been supportive throughout. So on the other end of that, I think this was the unique opportunity for AJ and I to bond. I have from the start been extremely careful to not try to be more to AJ than I've earned or than he would want me to be at any given point. Um, so I think that probably meant a slower start for our relationship, but I really wanted to build trust over time. And I think by the time we were starting to hit the road for soccer, we were both in a really great place for that. Um, and it's let me participate in his life in a really meaningful way. We have all of this travel time together. We've got to experience the highs and lows of sport together, which is a really unique experience. Um, And I appreciate it so much because I don't know that that would have happened without this sports experience. I think we certainly would have had a relationship, um, but to get to participate in that up close is a totally different thing.
You hit on Connor a little bit with supporting his brother at this point. What has that looked like as from your perspective as dad to watch your son, who your biological son, support his stepbrother in a way as he chased his dreams? What emotions has that brought in dad to watch your son do that?
Yeah, I mean, I love when I get to see them exchange, communication with each other about this. It's really great. In the modern age, you don't always get to see that because if they're texting each other directly or more frequently talking to each other while they're playing video games, um, that's sort of hidden away from us and we don't get to see it. So any of those moments where I get to see them hype each other up, it makes me so happy. But I can also go back and look, um, when they were smaller, middle school, late elementary school, early middle school age. Connor's playing baseball, AJ's playing soccer, and they're attending each other's games. They're sitting on the sidelines. I've got photos of Connor stretching AJ out on the sideline when they're like 9 years old, and that's been the relationship throughout. And I think that level of participation um, has just been really special.
You mentioned earlier coming back to the college piece of it. So before we get into that, AJ played top level of soccer in America. Is he playing in college?
No, he will not be playing in college.
His choice, or how did that go?
His choice. So, if I probably the biggest thing that we had to learn about as parents in this process was the college recruitment process and the path, the entryway into college athletics. We knew nothing, so learning the rules, learning how to make contact, where AJ might actually have a chance, that was all kind of a huge pain for us. Um, we are especially fortunate because we have parents on our team who work in Division One athletics in a way that, they understand all of it, that in ways that other parents probably wouldn't. And they were a huge help. With all of their help, I would say we still came away pretty unimpressed by all of it. It was chaotic. It was unorganized. It was just not impressive. And so I think that experience did play a small part in AJ's decision to not play in college. Um, it just wasn't a good experience for him. Um, but the majority of his decision actually came down to him being a really insightful and social kid who realized that he missed out on a lot of experiences in high school because he was always on a soccer field. So practice Monday through Thursday, games Saturday and Sunday just doesn't leave a lot of social time for a kid who has a lot of friends. And I don't think he wanted that to be his experience in college. And he realized, if I play, even if you're playing, D3, D2 soccer, you're going to still be practicing all the time. And if your goal is to eventually get to D1, you want to transfer somewhere, your schedule will be dictated for you. You will be told where to go, when to eat, when to study. And AJ wanted opportunities to do other things. And so he elected completely on his own not to play in college.
We had on Corey McMillan, who's a senior softball player at Virginia Tech. I had her on back in February. And part of her story was she said that those sacrifices that AJ's talking about, like, she's okay with it. Like, because she wanted to play in college, she was okay making those sacrifices. And I think hearing your story with AJ there, he was okay with it in high school, but he didn't want to do it again in college. And that's such an important thing for kids to understand themselves. We can't make that decision for them. We can't tell them it's worth it to miss out on all these things because you get to do this. They have to say, okay, you know what? Here are the costs. Here is what I'm going to experience. Do I love playing this sport enough to give up all the other things or to find my social life in the sport? And for some kids, Corey, she's had a great senior season and she would say she'd do it again in a heartbeat. AJ,
Yeah, I,
he's good.
I think that for people who are participating at that level, for those kinds of kids, they know themselves. And I think that the question that they're trying to answer at the end of it is at every stage, end of every stage, do I have anything left to prove to myself as an athlete? And I feel like AJ, the answer for him would be no, I did this and I know what I'm capable of. I know I could do this at a higher level if I wanted to. I'm just not interested anymore. I've done it and now I'd like to do something else. Um,
Till his
yeah,
football team needs a kicker his junior year and he's the goalie out there.
sure. But I'll say he's also, he selected his school for the fall, and he picked a school with a great sports management program because that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to leave sports. He loves sports. He just doesn't feel the need to participate, as an athlete anymore. And I think that's an important distinction.
You and Sabrina have approached this from such a healthy way that I want to get your perspective. And this is one of the last questions we have before we get out of here. As you all came to the end of AJ's journey and he made that decision that I'm done, you've invested all this money into his youth career. A lot of parents would be disappointed. They'd be frustrated that, hey, we're not getting the return on this investment that if you're not going to go play in college. What were the emotions you all went through as he came to that decision?
I mean, I think especially for my wife, there was probably a small moment where this felt a little bittersweet because, again, we have become fans of the game. We do enjoy watching him play. We love all of that. And so there was probably some part of us that hoped we might get to travel to a few games and watch in college, but it was a really small part, honestly. I think a lot of our friends have asked this question, like, are you sad that he's not, are you disappointed that you invested that? And no, not at like only in the sense that we love watching him play. Otherwise, not at all, because from the outset, this was not about us or what we wanted to get out of it. This was about him and what he wanted to do. And he wanted to do this. He wanted to pursue this, and we wanted to give him that opportunity. Um, so, you know, again, he's decided to go a different path. But I think my wife and I would both say that we've gotten so much out of this experience that is more valuable than a college scholarship or getting to see him play a little while longer. The time we got to spend with him, getting to see him grow from where he started on this journey to now, um, you know, that as a 15-year-old coming into that team, the anxiety, the nervousness, how hard he was on himself in those early games to the confidence he has now and being able to handle these big games without pressure. That watching that experience for him is so great. Also, getting to see him make friends for life with some of the kids on this team because they've experienced some pretty big things over the last couple of years. I haven't mentioned, but the first two seasons that our team existed, they came in first place in the Southeast Division of MLS Next in the regular season, and that meant they got to go to the playoffs. Last year, going to the playoffs, the MLS Next Cup, they made a really deep run. They got to the semifinals. That is, as an unaffiliated team that's not associated with one of the MLS franchises, that was a huge deal and completely unexpected for everyone. Um, and what an experience for our little team. That was great. Um, so I think all of those experiences and getting to see our dedicated kid dedicate himself to something like that, um, that was huge. And I would encourage everyone to take the opportunity if you get it, but to do it for your child. Don't do it for some potential benefit that may come down the road. Do it for the benefit of the immediate benefit. Be present, enjoy the ride, um, and let them stick to that commitment. But let the kid drive that. Don't force it.
One of my favorite things to do on here is this next question because anytime I talk to smart people, I know there's something I'm not thinking of that you think people should know. So, what have I not asked you that I should have asked you already?
Um, I think you really hit it there with the why should you do this? I think that's what I would think about most. Um, but I guess if I were gonna expand that at all, really, I just consider it hard, um, but invest in your kid if you can do it. If you have the opportunity, do that. I think in the end, you will appreciate it so much more if you go in with that attitude than if you go in expecting to get um, some monetary benefit or some tangible thing at the end.
And last question, and then we'll let you go because I know you've got to run a university pretty much and a hospital system and all the things you do now. Um, I like to end each episode with an encouragement. And you kind of hit it there, but for the parents who don't know what they're doing, for the ones who are just hanging on by a thread, trying to support their kid because this is what their kid loves, but they don't have a clue what they're doing, how would you encourage them this week as they go to practice and tournaments and games and they're just trying to love their kid the best they can?
Um, if you're facing a choice, if you're going into an experience like this, you don't know where you are. Listen to your kid. Just try to be in tune with them as much as possible. Um, Again, this was the only reason we ever got involved with sports at all is because our kids wanted to do it. Um, be in tune with them, and if you let them drive that, I think you'll figure it out. You You don't have to know everything. You will figure it out as you go. There will be some surprises. There will be some things that catch you off guard, especially a few bills that you didn't know were going to come. The sheer cost of Gatorade bottles alone has been staggering for our family. Um, but if you roll with that and listen to your kid, I think you will really enjoy the ride.
Nick, so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to do it.
That's it for today's episode. If you like the show, I'm going to invite you to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it would be a huge help for you to write up a small review. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button as well. If this episode has helped you in any way, the best way you can help us grow the show and get this message to more people is sharing this episode with a friend. Most of all, we hope you have a great week. Have so much fun watching your kids play this week. We will talk to you again next week. Have a great week, everybody.